We now enter the article-by-article commentary, the main section of this seminar. This is where we move from foundational concepts into the detailed requirements that govern pharmaceutical distribution operations. Each section builds on quality principles and translates them into practical procedures. The GDP Guidelines front half covers 5 major areas. First is the preamble, purpose, and scope, the framework for everything that follows. Chapter 1 focuses on quality management, which is built on the Pharmaceutical Quality System from IQ 10. This includes principles, the quality system itself, outsourced activities, management review, and quality risk management. Chapter 2 addresses personnel, and remember, this includes not just office staff but truck drivers and warehouse operators. Everyone involved in distribution must be qualified. Chapter 3 covers premises and equipment. Here we discuss DQ, IQ, OQ, and PQ qualification. Currently in practice, most companies perform only IQ and OQ, but the guideline expects all 4 stages. Chapter 4 begins documentation requirements, establishing how records must be created and maintained. The back half continues with Chapter 5 on operations, the practical heart of distribution where picking, packing, and dispatch occur. This is where theory meets real work. Chapter 6 addresses complaints, returns, falsified medicines, and recalls. This is critical. If you identify a counterfeit product, you must conduct a full recall regardless of whether you are the direct victim. Your responsibility is absolute. Chapter 7 covers outsourced activities, extending quality requirements to third-party operators. Chapter 8 addresses self-inspections. Note that self-inspection means audit, systematic verification and assessment. It is not simply checking boxes or walking through a warehouse. Chapter 9 covers transport, the final distribution phase where we verify that products reach customers in proper condition. Transport, in GDP terminology, refers to verification, described in the past tense, what happened during shipment. The guidelines also include a glossary defining key terms used throughout the document. The preamble establishes the foundational concept, medicinal product integrity, means maintaining medicines in their market-released condition without degradation, tampering, or destruction. Remember this definition, it could appear on competency exams. The preamble also emphasizes a critical goal, preventing falsified medicines from infiltrating the legitimate supply chain. This is not just about quality, it is about patient safety and market confidence. The guidelines apply to wholesale distributors and parties equivalent to distributors, which explicitly includes marketing authorization holders, MAHs. If you hold a license, you are responsible. Consider the scope diagram shown here. After a medicinal product is released to the market, it may follow various paths. Path 1. Factory ships directly to a wholesaler. Path 2. Factory ships to an MAH warehouse, which stores it and then releases it to the market, after which it may go to a wholesaler. Path 3 involves multiple intermediaries. The key point, when writing your standard operating procedures, you must consider all distribution patterns your company experiences. Do not assume a single route. Different supply chains require different control points. The GDP guidelines serve 3 purposes. First, promote uniformity of operations. If every distributor manages temperature differently or records complaints differently, the system becomes unpredictable. Second, provide reference methods. The guidelines offer systematized approaches that organizations can adopt or adapt. Third, and this is crucial, the guidelines are intended as a basis for organizations to create their own rules. Flexibility is built in. Alternative methods are acceptable provided that the fundamental principles are achieved. You are not required to follow every detail verbatim if you can demonstrate that your approach accomplishes the same protective goal. The guidelines apply only to post-market release distribution. They cover procurement of medical products, storage, and supply to pharmacies and hospitals. Critical limitation: the guidelines do not include the API procurement stage. That falls under GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice. Distribution begins after manufacturing is complete and the product is released to market. This diagram illustrates the scope boundaries. Manufacturing concludes at the market release point. From that point forward, procurement, storage, transport, and delivery to healthcare facilities all fall within GDP scope. Chapter 1.1 establishes quality management principles. A quality system is required. This system must clearly define responsibilities, establish processes, and incorporate risk management. The principle is this: all distribution activities must have clear procedures. This includes trucks and warehouses, no exception. All critical stages must be validated. Management must exercise leadership and oversight. Our company receives many requests from warehouse operators and transporters asking how to build GDP quality systems from scratch. Here is a representative list of SOPs typically needed: document management, change control, deviation management, complaints and returns, counterfeit detection and recalls, CAPA, self-inspection procedures. Training, hygiene, product quality review, quality management review, outsourced activities. Management, facilities and equipment, receipt storage dispatch procedures, temperature control, transportation, and pharmacist in charge responsibilities. These SOPs mirror the GMP and GQP SOPs you likely already have in your manufacturing operations. The systematic approach is identical. Do not treat distribution as separate or less rigorous. The same discipline applies. Chapter 1.2 details the quality system itself. The system must encompass organizational structure, documented procedures, defined processes, and adequate resources. The system's two core objectives are ensuring product integrity and ensuring a legitimate supply chain free of counterfeits. The system must be documented in a quality manual. Management must appoint a person with clear quality responsibility. Adequate resources, budget, personnel, equipment must be committed. When designing your quality system, consider the scale and structure of your business. A small local distributor's system will differ from a national wholesaler's system. The principle is the same, the implementation is proportionate. Your system must include a change management process that incorporates quality risk management principles. Do not change operations ad hoc. Changes must be assessed for risk, documented, and approved. Your quality system must ensure several outcomes: GDP compliant procurement, storage, and supply of products. Clear assignment of management responsibilities with documented authority. Prompt delivery of products to customers. Contemporaneous creation of records, not reconstructed later. Recording of all deviations from procedure. CAPA based on quality risk management principles, not guesswork. Chapter 1.3 addresses outsourced activities. This is vital. Your quality system extends to all outsourced activities. If you contract with a warehouse operator, a transporter, or a return handler, your quality responsibilities do not disappear, they expand to include monitoring the contractor. You must evaluate the contractor's capability to perform the activity, and their capability to ensure integrity and security of products. Documentation is required. You must verify that the contractor holds necessary licenses and that those licenses remain valid. You must execute not just a contract, but a quality agreement in Japanese, a toriikim sho. This is more detailed than a standard commercial contract. It specifies GDP requirements, responsibilities, and verification methods. GDP audits of contractors should be performed every 1 to 3 years, depending on the risk level of the outsourced activity. Chapter 1.4 requires a formal, periodic management review process. This is where senior management examines whether the quality system is working and achieving its objectives. You must define and monitor key performance indicators, KPIs. The management review must examine multiple data points: complaints, recalls, returns, deviations from procedure, CAPA effectiveness, process changes, feedback from audits of outsourced activities, risk assessments. Self-inspection findings, results from customer audits, and results from authority inspections. If you have received 3 FDA Form 483 observations or a warning letter, that is a management review trigger. These are signals that something in your system requires correction. Here are examples of key performance indicators used in distribution. Personal injury rate, 0 tolerance desired. Temperature excursions, number and duration. Damage to products, causes and frequency. Mispicking errors, critical for patient safety. Product loss or shrinkage. Delivery delays beyond agreed timelines. When you see 10 ppm, this means 1 failure per 100,000 operations. If you pick 100,000 items in a month and make 1 error, you have achieved 10 ppm. Target management requires continuous monitoring of such data. The management review must also examine external factors. New regulations or guidance published, quality information from pharmacovigilance, technology innovations that might improve operations, and changes in the business environment. Results of the review must be recorded and communicated throughout the organization. This creates a PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act, where insights lead to improvements. Chapter 1.5 requires quality risk management, based on ICQ-9 principles. This is a systematic process: assess risks, control those risks, communicate about risks, and review the process periodically. Risk management must be both prospective and retrospective. It must be science-based and focused on patient protection. Here is a critical insight: risk level determines management level. Gastric antacids have a low risk profile. Anti-cancer drugs have a high risk profile. Blood products and vaccines have the highest risk profile. Your controls must be proportionate to the product's risk. Here is a practical example. Analyze your distribution process step by step: procurement, receipt inspection, storage, picking, packing, shipping, transport to customer. At each step, identify the risks. For example, at receipt, is the product properly labeled? Is there temperature evidence? At storage, are conditions maintained? At picking, is the right product selected? For each risk, assess severity and probability. Based on that assessment, determine the level of control needed. This is quality risk management in practice. Chapter 2 begins with the personnel section. Here is the foundational statement: proper distribution depends on people. You must have a sufficient number of qualified personnel. Each person's individual responsibilities must be clearly understood and documented in writing. Chapter 2.2 requires an organization chart showing all roles and responsibilities. For key positions: responsible person, quality manager, warehouse manager, transport manager, returns handler. You must have written job descriptions that specify the individual's duties, the difficulty level of the role, the required skills and qualifications, and required experience. Deputy job descriptions must also be documented so that succession and emergency coverage are clear. Chapter 2.3 requires the appointment of a responsible person. This person must possess knowledge and training and experience in pharmaceutical distribution. This is not a purely administrative role. The responsible person must maintain an emergency contact system operational on nights, weekends, and holidays. If a crisis occurs at 3 a.m., someone must be reachable. The responsible person's job description must document specific responsibilities, authority, and resources allocated to the role. The responsible person's duties include implementation and maintenance of the quality management system, management of authority and responsibility throughout the organization, ensuring record accuracy, designing and executing training programs, managing recall operations if required, handling and investigating customer complaints. The responsible person must verify that all suppliers and customers hold valid licenses and that licenses do not expire without notice. Continuing the responsible person's duties. Oversight of self-inspections. Maintaining records of delegated authority, who is authorized to make which decisions. Authority to decide whether products can be returned to stock. whether products are unsaleable, whether recalled products have been handled correctly, and how to manage falsified medicines. The responsible person must approve any return to stock decision. And critically, the responsible person must ensure that all operations comply with national regulations. Chapter 2.4 addresses training. Every person involved in procurement, storage, or supply must receive GDP training. Written training programs are required, both initial training for new hires and continuing training to maintain competence. The responsible person must also participate in and maintain their own GDP competence. Management must receive GDP training so they understand what they are overseeing. Training must include identification and handling of falsified medicines. This is not optional. Special training is required for personnel handling. Narcotic and psychotropic medicines, these have legal restrictions. Radiopharmaceuticals, these involve radiation safety. Products with abuse potential. Temperature-sensitive products requiring special handling. All training must be recorded. Training effectiveness must be evaluated periodically, through competency testing, comprehension quizzes, or observation of correct performance. Training programs must be documented and current. Records must show what training was provided, when it occurred, and whether the person demonstrated competence. Training is not a one-time event, it is an ongoing cycle of knowledge maintenance. Chapter 2.5 addresses hygiene. Personnel hygiene procedures must exist. Health management to prevent sick people from handling medicines. Procedures for changing when required, and restrictions on access during illness. Your hygiene SOP must cover facility hygiene, personnel hygiene, access restrictions, pest control, and proper drainage and waste handling. These hygiene requirements extend to warehouse operators and transporters. Do not assume they understand pharmaceutical hygiene standards. Hygiene extends beyond obvious measures. Consider, do personnel entering the cold storage area touch their faces after touching shared door handles? Are there hand hygiene stations? Is there segregation between food personal areas and product storage areas? These seem basic, but deviation data shows they are often overlooked. Chapter 3.1 establishes premises principles. Your facilities must be appropriate for proper storage and distribution. They must be clean, dry, and maintained at acceptable temperature. Room temperature is defined as 1 to 30 degrees Celsius. Many medicines do not chemically degrade at 40 degrees Celsius, but regulatory management treats anything above 30 degrees Celsius as an excursion. Plan accordingly. Refrigerated storage is defined as 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. A door left open in summer heat quickly exceeds 8 degrees Celsius. Your monitoring and control must account for real-world conditions. Chapter 3.2 specifies premises requirements. Premises must be designed to maintain required conditions. Adequate security, structural soundness, sufficient space, proper lighting, and ventilation are necessary. If your warehouses are operated by external contractors, you must have written agreements specifying GDP requirements. Storage areas must be segregated from non-pharmaceutical areas. No food warehouses, no chemical plants, no contaminated materials nearby. If you use computer systems to manage inventory separation, those systems must be validated to ensure the software correctly prevents mixing of products. Chapter 3.2.4 requires physical quarantine areas. Rejected products, falsified products, and recalled products must be physically segregated from saleable inventory. These areas must be locked. Labels must clearly identify the status so there is no accidental release. Chapter 3.2.5 through 3.2.7 address special storage areas. Narcotics and psychotropic medicines must be stored according to local law. Radioactive materials must be stored per radiation safety regulations. Flammable materials must meet fire safety codes. Loading areas and docks must be protected from weather. This might mean a dock shelter or time limits on how long products can remain exposed during loading or unloading. Chapter 3.2.8 addresses access control. Many companies use IC card entry systems but button exit systems. This is a trap. Entry is recorded but exit is not. You may have records showing that an employee entered the area 3 years ago with no corresponding exit record. That is a control gap. Security cameras and alarm systems are required. Access logs must be reviewed regularly. Chapter 3.2.9 addresses cleanliness. Do not overlook hard to clean areas, window sills, tops of fluorescent light fixtures, corners where shelving meets walls. In warehouses, light fixtures may lack protective covers, dust collects on the bulbs and falls onto products. Chapter 3.2.10 requires pest control procedures. Pest control means monitoring and prevention, not simply killing pests after they appear. Design storage areas to prevent pest entry. Records from external pest control contractors must be maintained. Chapter 3.2.11 requires that rest areas, wash areas, and toilets be separated from product storage areas. Personal items must not be stored in or brought into storage areas. No food, drink, smoking, or personal medicines are allowed in the warehouse. Chapter 3.3.1 requires procedures and equipment for temperature and environmental control. You must manage not just temperature but also lighting, humidity, and cleanliness. Chapter 3.3.2 requires temperature mapping before use. Under worst-case conditions, summer at its hottest, winter at its coldest, place temperature data loggers at representative points throughout the storage area. Usually 4 or more points are needed. Run mappings in summer and in winter. Identify hot spots and cold spots. If you relocate equipment, if you change shelving, or if you significantly modify your risk assessment, remap the area. Chapter 3.4 addresses equipment. Equipment must be designed, installed, and maintained for its intended purpose. Calibration of temperature equipment, thermometers, and monitoring devices must be based on risk and required accuracy. Calibration must be traceable to national standards. Alarm systems must alert personnel when conditions exceed acceptable ranges. Regular function testing of all critical equipment is required. Chapter 3.4.4 and 3.4.5 address maintenance and records. Maintenance work must not compromise product integrity. If you must open a refrigerator for repair, what prevents product degradation during that time? Contingency procedures must exist for equipment failure. You must have maintenance records for all key equipment, cold storage units, alarm systems, access control systems, backup refrigerators, thermometers, HVAC systems, and any downstream linked equipment. Remember the access control example, entry and exit management are both needed. Not entry only. Chapter 3.5 addresses computerized systems. CSV computer system validation is required before use. You must demonstrate that the system is accurate, consistent, and reproducible. Validation or verification both are acceptable. Either approach satisfies the requirement. System documentation must be kept current. Access controls must limit who can enter or modify data. Data must be protected from accidental or unauthorized changes. Backups must be maintained at a location physically separate from the original system. Backup stored in the same building is meaningless in a fire or disaster. System failure procedures must be documented. If your inventory system crashes, how do you continue operations? The answer must be documented and tested. Reference the 2010 ICQ-7 CSV guideline for detailed implementation. Chapter 3.6 addresses qualification and validation. First, identify which equipment requires qualification and which processes require validation. Equipment qualification follows 4 stages: DQ, IQ, OQ, and PQ. Process validation ensures that business processes, picking, packing, transport, actually achieve their intended purpose. Many companies perform only IQ and OQ. The guideline expects all 4. Chapter 3.6.2 and 3.6.3 require requalification after significant changes. Repair, maintenance, relocation, or major modification requires change management and revalidation. Validation and qualification reports must document deviations encountered and CAPA responses. Qualification and validation are ongoing responsibilities, not one-time projects. As your equipment ages or conditions change, your qualification status must be reviewed and updated. Chapter 4.1 establishes documentation principles. Documentation prevents verbal communication errors and enables traceability. If a problem occurs, you must be able to show what happened, when, and who was responsible. Critical, contemporaneous recording. Records must be created at the time work is performed, not reconstructed later from memory. You cannot carry lot numbers in your head back to the office and record them an hour later. The record must be made in real time. Chapter 4.2 specifies general documentation requirements. Documents include all procedures, instructions, contracts, records, and data, whether on paper or electronic. Documents must be available when needed, not filed in a box requiring days to retrieve. Personal data must be handled per privacy laws. All documents must be comprehensive, accurate, and understandable. They must be authorized by appropriate personnel, signed, and dated. Chapter 4.2.5 through 4.2.8 address changes and version control. Any changes to documents must include the signature of the person making the change, the date of change, the original text remaining readable, and the reason for change recorded. Documents must be retained for the period required by law or regulation, typically years. Version management is critical. Prevent use of obsolete document versions. Remove old versions from work areas. If an old procedure is discovered being followed, that is a deviation requiring CAPA. This slide introduces the critical requirements for GDP-specific records. Companies must maintain detailed records at two crucial points in the supply chain: when purchasing and receiving products, and when selling and supplying them to customers. A key lesson from the Harvoni case. A significant counterfeit incident was that transactions without proper ID verification created vulnerabilities in the supply chain. These records can be maintained in either paper or electronic format, but if electronic, they must be readily retrievable at any time. For handwritten records, the standard is clear: they must be legible, indelible, and use permanent ink. No pencil is acceptable, as it can be easily altered, compromising the integrity of your traceability system. The content of GDP records must be comprehensive. At minimum, each record must include the product name, lot number, expiry date, and quantity transacted. But this is only the beginning. You must also record the purchaser's name, address, phone number, and contact information. Additionally, you need to maintain copies of ID verification documents and proof of the employment relationship with the purchaser or supplier. This level of detail might seem burdensome, but it serves a fundamental purpose: ensuring complete traceability. If a counterfeit or defective batch enters the market, these records allow you to immediately identify where it came from and where it went, enabling rapid containment. This slide covers additional requirements for GDP documentation. Beyond the basic transaction records, companies must ensure that all documentation systems maintain clear audit trails. Records should be organized in a manner that allows quick retrieval during inspections or in case of recalls. The principle is that documentation should tell the complete story of each product's journey through the supply chain, from receipt to final dispatch or destruction. Systematic organization and regular auditing of these records help identify gaps or inconsistencies that could indicate problems. Chapter 5 addresses the operational principles that underpin GDP compliance. The fundamental requirement is that all actions throughout the wholesaling and distribution process must maintain product identity and integrity. Companies must comply with all handling instructions printed on product packaging. These aren't suggestions, they're critical requirements. A major focus of this chapter is eliminating the risk of counterfeit infiltration. This requires using all available methods: supplier qualification, customer verification, staff training, and environmental controls. The goal is to create a distribution environment where counterfeits cannot gain a foothold. Supplier qualification is detailed in sections 5.2.1 through 5.2.3. The starting point is simple but non-negotiable: source products only from licensed wholesalers or manufacturers. Before approving a supplier, verify their GDP compliance status and confirm that their licenses are current and valid. The process includes formal supplier qualification, written approval, and periodic re-evaluation at defined intervals. When necessary, particularly if concerns arise, conduct an on-site audit. These audits serve two purposes: they verify that suppliers maintain adequate controls, and they build your audit trail documenting your due diligence. Section 5.2.4 provides critical guidance on due diligence for new suppliers. Several red flags should trigger heightened scrutiny. Be cautious if a supplier has reputation concerns or a history of regulatory issues. Immediately investigate if they offer products you suspect to be counterfeit. Be suspicious of offers to supply large quantities of scarce products. This often indicates diversion from legitimate channels. Unstable product ranges, where the supplier suddenly offers new products without clear explanation, warrant investigation. Perhaps most obviously, unexpected pricing or excessive discounts are warning signs. Many companies find it helpful to create supplier qualification checklists based on these red flags, ensuring consistent evaluation across all potential partners. Customer qualification mirrors supplier qualification. Verify that your customers are legitimate, licensed pharmacies, manufacturers, wholesalers, or hospitals operating in regulated jurisdictions. Check their permits and credentials before approving them as customers. This is particularly important because abnormal sales patterns, unusual quantities, unexpected frequency, or orders that don't match the customer's typical business may indicate product diversion. If you identify suspicious patterns, investigate thoroughly and consider reporting to regulatory authorities. These actions protect not just your company, but the entire supply chain. Receipt of products requires careful attention. When goods arrive, confirm that the shipment is correct and comes from an approved supplier. Inspect the packaging for visible signs of transport damage. For products requiring special conditions, cold chain items or narcotics, prioritize processing. Get these items immediately to appropriate storage to maintain their integrity and security. Damaged goods should be quarantined immediately and investigated per your procedures. This is your first line of defense against counterfeit or compromised products entering your warehouse. Storage requirements are detailed in sections 5.5.1 through 5.5.4. Pharmaceutical products must be stored separately from non-pharmaceutical items to prevent mix-ups and contamination. Storage areas must protect products from light exposure, temperature fluctuations, and excessive humidity. Dedicated transport vehicles should be used whenever possible. Incoming packaging should be cleaned to remove external contaminants before storage. The FIFO or FIFO principle must be strictly applied. A common problem in older warehouses is that stock stored at the back becomes forgotten and eventually expires while still on shelves. This waste and risk can be prevented with proper inventory rotation discipline. Sections 5.5.5 through 5.5.7 address ongoing storage management. Storage systems must prevent leakage, breakage, contamination, and mix-ups. Except for medical gases, products must never be stored directly on the floor. A critical requirement that is sometimes overlooked: products approaching their expiry date must be removed from saleable inventory before they expire. The guideline says, approaching expiry, not just expired. This is important because products may expire during their time in customer distribution or pharmacy storage. If you dispatch a product that will expire in 2 weeks, it might expire before the pharmacy dispenses it. Regular stock taking, physical counting, and reconciliation confirms that your records match reality. Destruction of expired and unusable products is covered in Chapter 5.6. The process is straightforward but must be documented. Identify expired products, physically segregate them, clearly label them, and handle them per your standard operating procedures. Disposal must comply with applicable laws, which may vary by jurisdiction regarding pharmaceutical waste. Most importantly, record all destructions, including date, product, lot, quantity, and method. This documentation proves to regulators that you're managing product lifecycle properly and not allowing expired goods to re-enter the supply chain. Picking is the process of retrieving specified products from the warehouse for dispatch to customers. While it may seem like a routine warehouse operation, it's a critical quality control point. Implement controls to prevent picking the wrong products. Verify that the product being picked matches the customer's order. Always check the expiry date before picking to ensure only saleable product is selected. Quarantined items, whether under investigation, potentially counterfeit, or damaged, must never be picked for customer orders. Many companies use barcode scanning or other systematic verification to ensure picking accuracy. The supply or dispatch operation must be fully documented. Records must include product name, lot number, expiry date, transport and storage conditions, quantity supplied, date of supply, and detailed purchaser information. If the delivery address differs from the purchaser's registered address, record that difference too. This level of detail serves the supply chain's collective safety. If a quality issue emerges later, these records tell the complete story: what was shipped, when, under what conditions, and to where. This information is essential for any recall or investigation. Chapter 6 is especially relevant for manufacturers, though wholesalers play a crucial supporting role. The chapter opens with fundamental principles: cooperate fully with manufacturers when quality issues arise. And understand that when counterfeits are discovered, manufacturers will be extremely busy. Maintain a consistent approach across the entire supply chain. Don't handle each situation differently based on the customer or supplier involved. For returned medicines, use appointed personnel to conduct pre-evaluation before products re-enter the supply chain. This person should have appropriate training and authority to make quality decisions. Section 6.2 Address complaints and quality information management. Record all complaints in detail, don't dismiss concerns as minor. Distinguish between quality complaints and distribution complaints. Promptly notify the manufacturer of any suspected quality defects. Conduct thorough investigations of complaints, and consider whether other lots from the same batch might be affected. Appoint a specific person responsible for complaint handling to ensure consistent, professional response. Your complaint system is often the first warning signal that something is wrong in the supply chain. Section 6.2.4 requires corrective and preventive action follow-up. As in formal CAPA processes taught in separate seminars, the goal is to identify root causes and execute corrective actions to fix the immediate problem, plus preventive actions to ensure it doesn't recur. Report findings to regulatory authorities when required. A critical point: complaint handling isn't complete when you file the investigation report. It's only finished when you've verified that your preventive actions actually prevent recurrence. This follow-up verification is where many companies fall short. Returned products are addressed in Section 6.3. The process must be risk-based and fully documented. Before deciding to restock a returned product, carefully consider the storage conditions it experienced and how much time elapsed since it left your facility. Returns require advance agreements with customers. Don't accept random returns without prior arrangement. Maintain return lists documenting what was returned. Most importantly, don't immediately restock returned products. They require careful evaluation before they can be safely returned to inventory. The specific conditions for returning products to stock are defined in Section 6.3.2. All 5 of these conditions must be met. First, the secondary packaging must be undamaged, unopened, in good condition, within expiry date, and not subject to recall. Second, the product must have been returned within an acceptable timeframe, typically around 10 days, though this varies by product type and conditions. Third, the customer must provide evidence that the product was stored and handled properly throughout its time outside your facility. Fourth, the returned product must be inspected by trained personnel before restocking. Fifth, you must have evidence of supply, proof that you originally supplied this batch, and no suspicion of falsification. Meeting all 5 requires documentation, inspection, and judgment. Sections 6.3.3 through 6.3.5 address special situations. Cold chain products, those requiring temperature control like biologics and certain vaccines, generally cannot be returned to stock, even if they meet other criteria. The only exception is when you have documented evidence from temperature loggers proving the product never deviated from required conditions. For products returned to stock, apply FIFO principles just as you do for new inventory. A product retrieved from a customer's shelf should be treated as older than newer stock. Finally, products that were stolen and recovered should never be returned to stock, regardless of their apparent condition. The risk of tampering during the theft period is unacceptable. Falsified medicines require advanced preparation. Don't wait until counterfeits are discovered to develop procedures, that's too late. Section 6.4.1 requires that upon suspicion or discovery of falsified medicines, you immediately suspend all sales and transport of the affected product. Section 6.4.2 specifies that you must notify the manufacturer and send specimens if possible. Manufacturers maintain retention samples of authentic products, which they use to conduct testing and authenticity assessments of suspected counterfeits. Section 6.4.3 requires that suspected falsified products be physically segregated in a dedicated, clearly labeled area, preventing any possibility of accidental mixing with legitimate inventory. Section 6.4.4 focuses on root cause analysis. When counterfeits are discovered, you must identify how they entered your distribution system. Did they come from an approved supplier who was unknowingly handling counterfeits? Did they bypass your supplier qualification process? Was there a gap in your verification procedures? Develop corrective and preventive actions based on this root cause analysis. Document the entire investigation thoroughly. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It helps you prevent recurrence, it demonstrates due diligence to regulators, and it contributes to the collective supply chain intelligence about counterfeiting patterns. Recalls are covered in sections 6.5.1 through 6.5.7. The most important element of recall capability is traceability, the ability to quickly identify all customers who received the affected product. Develop and maintain procedures for rapid recall activation. Contact all customers urgently with clear instructions about the recalled product. The manufacturer reports to regulatory authorities. Your role is to ensure rapid, accurate communication to your customers. Evaluate the effectiveness of the recall by confirming that all distributed product is accounted for and recovered. Be ready to launch a recall at any time with minimal notice. Many companies find it valuable to conduct mock recall drills regularly, testing their systems before a real crisis occurs. Sections 6.5.8 and 6.5.9 specify recall documentation requirements. Maintain distribution records in a format accessible to the recall manager. Don't bury them in a back-office system that's difficult to search. For each customer, record their address, 24-hour phone number, email address, product name, lot numbers, expiry dates, and quantities distributed. When the recall is complete, prepare a final report with reconciliation. Compare the total quantity shipped with the total quantity recovered. Any unexplained differences require investigation. This final accounting demonstrates that the recall was complete and effective. This slide covers additional aspects of Chapter 6 requirements. Beyond the specific topics already discussed, companies must ensure that their complaint, return, and recall systems are integrated and that relevant personnel across departments understand their roles. The Quality Assurance or Regulatory Affairs Department may coordinate these processes, or responsibilities may be distributed. Regardless of structure, clear procedures and trained personnel are essential. Regular review of complaints and returns provides early warning of emerging issues that might require system improvements or supplier re-evaluation. Chapter 7 addresses the reality that few companies handle every function internally. Many wholesalers and manufacturers use contract transporters, third-party warehouses, and other service providers. The principle is clear: precisely define and agree upon all outsourced activities through written contracts, with clear allocation of responsibilities. The goal is to prevent any doubt about who is responsible for what. Extract relevant GDP requirements from the full guidelines and allocate them clearly in your contract. The wholesaler handles product receipt and storage verification. The transporter handles vehicle preparation and temperature monitoring. The warehouse operator handles inventory management and picking. This clarity prevents gaps and finger pointing when problems occur. Section 7.2 emphasizes that outsourcing does not eliminate your responsibility. You remain accountable for the entire supply chain, even when other companies perform individual functions. Therefore, you must evaluate contract acceptors, your service providers, through formal contracts and periodic audits. Audit supply chain players regularly, with frequency based on risk. High risk or critical functions warrant more frequent audits. Routine functions may need less frequent verification. Provide all necessary information to your service providers so they can perform their functions correctly. This might include handling instructions, storage requirements, or security procedures. Sections 7.3.1 through 7.3.3 specify requirements for contract acceptors, the service providers who accept outsourced activities. They must have appropriate premises, equipment, procedures, knowledge, and trained staff to perform the work. In practice, many transporters and warehouse operators worldwide fail to meet these standards. Our consulting firm regularly receives requests to help companies address GDP compliance gaps in their service providers' operations. This suggests that many companies haven't adequately evaluated their contractors' capabilities. Importantly, contract acceptors may not subcontract work without your prior written approval. This prevents the creation of undisclosed supply chain links that you're unaware of and unable to audit. Sections 7.3.4 and 7.3.5 address ongoing requirements. Contract acceptors must not take any action that could harm product quality. They must report all quality impacting information according to the contractual terms. This might include temperature excursions, shipping delays, customer complaints, or suspicious activity. The responsibility for following up on this information varies depending on company structure. Some organizations place this responsibility with the GQP department, others with an audit or supplier management team. Regardless of structure, supplier management and periodic auditing of contracted activities are mandatory. This oversight ensures that your outsourced functions maintain the same standards as internal operations. Chapter 8 addresses self-inspections. In Japanese, the term sometimes carries connotations of mere checking or verification. But the GDP definition is clearer: self-inspection is actually an internal audit. It's a systematic, documented process where trained personnel examine whether operations comply with GDP principles and company procedures. The purpose of such audits is not to find mistakes and punish people, it's to identify gaps and propose improvements. This positive framing helps companies create a culture where audits are seen as learning opportunities rather than adversarial investigations. When people understand that audits help them do their jobs better, they cooperate more fully. Section 8.2 details implementation requirements. Designate specific persons with appropriate training and authority to conduct self-inspections. Conduct them at regular intervals, often annually for comprehensive audits, with more frequent targeted reviews as needed. Record all inspections, including the scope, findings, and conclusions. Audit reports should include all observations, not just problems. Even positive findings about effective controls are worth noting. Submit reports to management so they understand compliance status and resource needs. When deficiencies are identified, document the causes, develop corrective and preventive actions, and implement a systematic follow-up. Here's a critical point: auditing isn't complete when the report is written. True auditing effectiveness requires follow-up that confirms the identified problems actually get resolved. Without this follow-up discipline, audits become mere documentation exercises that don't drive real improvement. Chapter 9 addresses transportation, which is the least visible but critical part of the supply chain. The principles are straightforward. Companies must protect products from damage, degradation, and theft while maintaining required temperatures. Interestingly, this responsibility traditionally falls on the wholesale distributor, not the transporter. That's because the distributor selects the transporter, defines the service level, and bears the legal liability. Every transportation event involves different factors, different drivers, different trucks, potentially different routes. Air shipments involve mixed cargo from multiple shippers. How can you guarantee product integrity under these constantly changing conditions? That's the challenge management must solve through contracts, audits, and service-level agreements. Service providers execute the transport, but management responsibility remains with the company initiating the shipment. Risk-based proof of transport appropriateness is required for all transport modes. Section 9.2 addresses transport requirements. The fundamental principle is simple but easily overlooked. Storage conditions specified on product packaging must be maintained during transport. This is GDP's most fundamental requirement for transportation. Report any excursions, periods when conditions deviated from requirements, and any visible damage. Train drivers thoroughly on their role in protecting pharmaceutical products. Use checklists to ensure they follow procedures consistently. Include transportation requirements in contracts with service providers. Provide suitable vehicles and equipment for the intended use. Develop standard operating procedures for vehicle operation, maintenance, and cleaning to ensure vehicles remain in appropriate condition. Sections 9.2.5 through 9.2.8 address additional transport requirements. Conduct risk assessment of transport routes and methods. Identify key risk areas where problems might occur, particularly loading and unloading points where products are handled. Monitor equipment maintenance and calibration to ensure temperature control systems function properly. Use dedicated vehicles for pharmaceutical products whenever possible, rather than shared vehicles that transport mixed cargo. Only deliver products to specified, authorized destinations. Don't allow off-route deliveries or stops. Develop after-hours emergency procedures for situations like vehicle breakdown, because these often occur when normal support isn't available. Sections 9.2.9 and 9.2.10 address third-party transport. Contracts with transport service providers must include requirements from Chapter 7, the outsourcing chapter, plus all relevant transportation requirements. GDP requirements extend indirectly to transporters through these contractual obligations. Inform transporters of cargo conditions and any special handling requirements. In modern supply chains, transshipment at intermediate distribution hubs is common, but these transfer points are often invisible to the originating shipper. That's why contractual obligations combined with temperature loggers are essential. Temperature loggers document the entire temperature profile of a shipment, revealing whether any excursions occurred at any point in the journey, visible or not. Minimize temporary storage time at intermediate facilities because each storage period introduces risk of damage or mix-up. Section 9.3 addresses containers, packaging, and labeling. Selection of containers should be based on several factors. storage and transport requirements for the specific product, quantity being shipped, expected temperature extremes. The shipment will experience maximum duration in transit and, importantly, validation that the container will actually maintain required conditions. Don't simply use the smallest container available if the shipment will be in transit longer than validated. Account for delivery delays that might extend the shipment duration beyond typical transit time. Pre-validate packaging before use. Don't assume that a container that works for routine shipments will work for a long-distance shipment. Labels must include handling and storage information, plus identification of the contents and shipper. Clear labeling helps anyone handling the shipment understand its sensitivity and requirements. Section 9.4 addresses special conditions requiring heightened control. Narcotics and psychotropic substances must be distributed securely per national regulations, which vary significantly between countries. Theft or loss of these products is unacceptable, not just from a business perspective, but because it enables drug abuse. Develop detailed security procedures for these products. High potency and radioactive materials require handling per applicable regulations. Temperature-sensitive products, and this actually includes virtually all pharmaceuticals to some degree, require qualified equipment and documented procedures. Few products are truly stable across all temperatures, most have narrow ranges where they remain safe and effective. Sections 9.4.4 through 9.4.6 address temperature-controlled transportation. Calibrate temperature monitoring equipment before each use. Conduct temperature mapping, the process of measuring actual temperatures in different locations within a transport container, accounting for seasonal variations. Cold spots near air vents and warm spots near exterior walls are common. Provide temperature compliance information to customers so they can document receipt. A practical note: cool packs must not directly contact products, as they can cause freezing damage to products that should remain refrigerated, not frozen. Train staff on proper assembly of insulated cases and cool pack placement. Door position, air conditioning placement, and frequency of door opening all affect temperature stability. Doors opened for picking or scanning during transit create immediate temperature excursions. Sections 9.4.7 and 9.4.8 address cool pack management. Prevent the use of insufficiently cooled packs. They won't maintain temperature for the intended duration. Physically separate frozen and cooled packs to ensure they're used appropriately for their intended products. Develop standard operating procedures that account for seasonal variations. In winter, maintaining refrigeration temperature might require different cooling strategies than in summer, or might be achievable through passive insulation rather than active cooling. Transport is often the least visible and most difficult to control part of the supply chain. This is why contractual obligations clearly specifying requirements, regular audit verification of compliance, and temperature loggers documenting actual conditions are essential. The glossary section defines key terms used throughout the GDP Guidelines. Contract acceptor is a party that accepts outsourced activities based on a written contract. Contract giver is the party outsourcing activities and remaining responsible for them. Falsified medicinal product is defined according to the WHO 2017 definition as any medicinal product deliberately or unintentionally mislabeled regarding identity or source, including products with wrong ingredients, without active ingredients, with incorrect quantities of active ingredients, or with fake packaging. Suspected falsified product is a product that is believed to be falsified but hasn't yet been confirmed through testing. These definitions establish clear terminology across the entire supply chain. Additional glossary terms define temperature conditions. Cold storage is defined as 1 to 15 degrees Celsius, which covers refrigerated pharmaceuticals and biologics. Room temperature is defined as 1 to 30 degrees Celsius, which covers most non-refrigerated products. Secondary packaging refers to the outer packaging intended to contain the product and possibly other retail packages, as distinguished from primary packaging and tertiary packaging. These definitions ensure that references to temperature and packaging are understood consistently throughout the guidelines. The glossary defines recall as a systematic removal of a batch or series of batches of a product from the distribution chain due to quality defects or safety risks. Importantly, the definition includes corrections, product recalls, and patient monitoring activities, recognizing that recalls sometimes involve corrective actions beyond simple product retrieval. The definition explicitly excludes activities like inventory disposal as part of normal business operations or product exchanges for commercial reasons. This distinction clarifies that recalls are quality and safety actions, distinct from normal inventory management. This slide displays the seminar logo or sponsoring organization branding, acknowledging the institutions responsible for the seminar. It serves as a visual marker transitioning from the core guideline content to updated regulatory information.
The regulatory environment governing pharmaceutical distribution is evolving significantly. This slide introduces updated information reflecting changes through 2026. Major regulatory bodies worldwide are strengthening requirements for product traceability, implementing serialization, and upgrading quality standards. Companies must maintain awareness of these trends and adapt their systems accordingly. The following slides detail developments in specific regions and international frameworks, providing context for strategic planning and compliance decisions. Japan's GDP guidelines from 2018 remain the current standard. However, the regulatory landscape is evolving. In 2025, amendments to the Pharmaceutical Affairs Law were enacted, introducing new requirements that Japanese distributors must incorporate into their operations. The GS1 barcode system for pharmaceutical traceability has been mandatory since December 2022, advancing Japan's serialization infrastructure. Japan's approach covers dispensing package level, the unit dispensed to patients, which is globally advanced compared to carton level tracking in many other regions. A significant initiative is the construction of a unified database targeting completion by fiscal year 2027, which will enable comprehensive supply chain visibility from manufacturer to pharmacy. The USA's Drug Supply Chain Security Act continues phased implementation. Current status shows that 25 to 50% of pharmacy medicines have complete EPCIS data, advancing the goal of package-level electronic traceability. The ultimate objective is to enable rapid, electronic product authentication at each transfer point in the supply chain. This represents a significant evolution from paper-based systems to automated digital tracking, requiring substantial investment in technology infrastructure from distributors and pharmacies. EU implementation of the Falsified Medicines Directive has proven remarkably effective. Between 2019 and 2024, only 11 confirmed counterfeits were detected in legitimate supply channels, a testament to robust controls and verification systems. The European Medicines Verification System, which allows pharmacists to verify product authenticity at the point of dispensing, has successfully prevented large-scale counterfeit penetration. Serialization implementation continues to progress, with most pharmaceutical manufacturers now applying unique codes to dispensing units. However, high-cost medicines and online sales channels remain primary targets for counterfeiters, requiring continued vigilance. PICS provides guidance for GMP inspectorates worldwide. Recent developments include the updated GDP Inspection Aid Memoir guidance on conducting remote inspections and involvement of 57 regulatory authorities representing most major pharmaceutical markets. GMP developments include substantial revisions to Chapter 1, Annex 11, and a new Annex 22 addressing artificial intelligence applications in manufacturing. The WHO continues documenting counterfeit incidents, revealing that counterfeit cases have doubled in recent years. Particularly concerning are counterfeit versions of GLP-1 receptor agonists like semaglutide, which are increasingly being trafficked. Operation Pangea, an international enforcement action, resulted in 769 arrests related to pharmaceutical counterfeiting and illegal supply, demonstrating coordinated global efforts to combat drug supply chain crime. China's National Medical Products Administration, formerly known as the China Food and Drug Administration, enacted new overarching regulations in January 2024. These regulations emphasize strengthening pharmaceutical supply chain traceability. In January 2025, implementation regulations were revised, providing updated guidance for distributors and manufacturers. The Good Supply Practice Standards from 2013 remain valid, though revision is anticipated to align with evolving international standards. These changes reflect China's commitment to improving pharmaceutical supply chain quality and reducing counterfeit infiltration in a market historically vulnerable to counterfeiting. In summary, several major trends are shaping the global pharmaceutical supply chain landscape. First, GDP principles are transitioning from voluntary guidance to legally binding requirements in more jurisdictions. Second, traceability requirements are tightening, with movement toward serialization and electronic tracking at package level. Third, counterfeiting continues to evolve, with biopharmaceuticals and GLP-1 receptor agonists emerging as new high-value targets. While online pharmaceutical sales remain the supply channel most vulnerable to counterfeit penetration. Fourth, digital technologies including artificial intelligence are advancing in manufacturing and quality control, with corresponding regulatory updates. The message for companies is clear: GDP compliance is no longer optional or aspirational, it's becoming legally mandated. Rather than waiting for your regulatory jurisdiction to enact stricter requirements, companies should proactively strengthen their supply chain quality systems now. This proactive approach prevents the scramble and costs associated with reactive compliance when new rules suddenly take effect. Thank you for your attention throughout this comprehensive GDP Guidelines seminar.
Too many documents, too many revisions, too much compliance pressure. Is your QMS still under control?
Bring structure to your quality system with ready-to-use SOPs, forms, and templates. Adapt them to your operation. Start with QMSdoc.com.